Hi, I'm Richard Bronson, and I'd like to read from my new book, Passage. It's a new collection of poems. There are three sections. The first part is a series of 12 lyrical poems. The sequence is called The Months. There's a middle section called GP, which is a reminiscence of my parents. My father was a family practice doctor in the Bronx, had a large practice during the Korean War. And the third is called Congruences, and it's by my own experiences in medicine, a number of years. And the first poem I'm going to read is called Imperfect Knowledge. My toes wriggled skeletal within new shoes, big toe, little ones, as x-rays passed through me, no worry of Roentgens or rads. I stepped off the pedestal, laughed, and the shoe salesman smiled, said, "Look again if you like," and we both watched the goodness of the fit. My father, a general all-around doc, made use of x-rays too. How many chest x-rays did he perform? Set fractures under fluoroscopy, not realizing danger of overexposure, no lead to shield his body. In the end, did it matter? Heart disease caught up with him, his 100-patient days, not cancer. After the first coronary, his face a fractured moon, gray within the mist of a plastic oxygen tent. I thought he would break apart, never return to us. Before the second lethal blow, I saw him in the kitchen, taking red pills from the fridge. Estrogen, he said. They tell me it's good for my heart. I'd grow breasts if I had to. Yes, I hoped then, but now no, it wasn't so. And in the second poem, To His Violin. I found you, abandoned, in the attic of my boyhood home, your broken bridge, rusting strings, a testimony to disregard. When had you last sung? In what year did he last hold you in his loving hands? Can you sing me a song of my lost father, of the time you had together? The long-dead maestro, you, his prima donna. When did he last place you in your case, where you have waited in aging velvet until lifted from that grave resting place, and I stroked your strings? If I were to raise your frayed bow, touch so lightly those strings, would you whisper why he lost interest, left you longing in your case? What was his new love that led to this estrangement? What ruled him that nothing else mattered? His music, his family? Sing me a song of my lost father, of the times you had together. Tell me of his passion. Whisper his secrets that I may understand. The next poem I'm going to read is about my mom. My mom and dad spent many years together while he was trying to build a practice. Basically, the office was in their apartment, and they lived there and then worked there at the same time. My mom lived till she was in her late 90s and was fortunately very healthy and very sharp until almost the very end. Perfect. She snapped each bean to judge its freshness, pressed each peach, each tomato squeezed, while I looked up at the counters, walked the aisles of A&P behind her cart. We smelled cantaloupes, shook the honeydews, thumped the watermelons, felt the firmness of cucumbers. She sniffed coffee beans before they were ground, knew the odor of fresh fish, color of spoiled meat. She has lived her life this way, judging for herself the quality of things, what others take for granted. You sense it in her elocution, her dress, her hair, her high-heeled shoes, the refusal to wear sneakers. Now she is no longer perfect, needs an aid to help her dress. Her gait precarious, but her mind is clear. She still wears heels. It is her way, though death lurks with every fall. The next poem is called Mount Zion, and there's an epigraph from Shakespeare, from Macbeth. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. My father gone, mother nearing 90. I felt the need to deal with duties, her living will, healthcare proxy, a strategy for the end of life. And in the turmoil of those days, I thought of Mount Zion. Mute slabs inscribed in ancient Hebrew stood row upon row, receding over the hill. And I, a child who knew nothing of death, looked up at my grandfather, whose hand I held. Two bearded strangers spoke words I did not understand, an agony of grief, and held out their hands for gelt. We placed pebbles on the headstone, grandfather lifting me to place mine. Now, in dream, I walked again through older zones of silent stones to newer graves, speaking messages from the dead. A bronze cube lectured, a steel bull sang a gospel of hope, a glass spire complained, "You never cared." Weeks passed before I tell her of my dream. "Mom, if you could speak a last testament, what would you choose?" As though deciding how to die was not enough. A gruesome thought, no, I'd not go silent into that night. You know my favorite lines from Shakespeare, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. I'm going to move on to the next poem from Congruences. The first poem is called A Bellevue Story. Marvin, you came to us out of the Bowery, limbs, skull, ribs fractured, unconscious, in shock, more dead than alive, a mangled piece of dirty, stinking humanity, hit and run on the street. They said you were bumming a drink. We drilled burr holes in your fractured skull, drained your bloody subdurals. You awakened. Your ribcage shattered. We tubed and trached you. You breathed for us. Alive but not well, your saga began. You survived the sepsis of your Foley catheter and the DTs. Strapped down, you raged. We knew you were healing when old habits returned. How about a smoke, Doc? I lit up a cigarette, puffed through your trach. It was your only pleasure. In the ebb time, after midnight, wired in traction, you bled. Red invaded the white of your plaster pants. We descended on you, buzzing our striker saws, like drones serving a queen, but it was too late to save your leg. I lost track of you in rehab. It was your 6th month in Bellevue. Walking didn't come easy, the non-union of your fracture, your AK amputation, but you survived it all and left after a year. I saw you last in admitting that following spring, back in town from Camp LaGuardia. You're on the streets once more, your prosthesis broken, you crawl the gutters. They carried you in on a stretcher. I called the social workers. We were happy to see you again, in need of a cleaning, but still surviving. I found your bed, disinfected you. We replaced your broken prosthesis and a little of your broken life. Sin and absolution for a former mentor. I stood by you, watched the cut through sternum, splayed chest, the beating heart, and naked innocence before me, overworked, a hole at its core, blood gushing with each beat through a defect like a dike needing to be plugged. You opened the heart, patched the hole with a piece of cloth sewn in place. Work done, we closed the chest. This a new beginning, not an end, but time proved us wrong. The heart abandoned its stately beat, danced a wild tarantella, despite our ministrations that night, through drugs, then shocks, the paddles in my hands, as if I could make a wayward child comply by punishment, and finally quit. After morning rounds, at your request, I joined you in the morgue, still in scrubs, by the chest reopened, holding his heart in your hand. Look, the original sin, a stitch did him in, caught the bundle of hits. Nothing you could have done to change the outcome. I nodded quietly. A guest at communion. The pastor wipes his chalice clean as one by one they come to drink. Some place the host within their mouth, then sip. Others dip into the wine, partake of the body and the blood. Between hymns and homily, from under his robes, the pastor takes a handkerchief, blows his nose. With an eye for illness, I wonder what might pass from one to another. This congregation shares their faith in more. Perhaps the blood of Christ destroys all germs, but to be safe, I'd rather be a wafer dipper than a goblet sipper. Testimony is an epigraph. Now, what is the purpose of Connecticut in telling married people that they cannot use contraceptives? A court, Griswold versus Connecticut. A hand reaches under the counter. My hand under the counter. The garage had 3 bays, usually filled. You pumped your gas, washed your windshield, always with a smile. Bazooka gum for the kids, or a couple of kitchen glasses came with a fill-up. My hand under the counter pulls a 6-pack out the drawer. We lived in a 3-story house, me and my brother. Behind the garage, 3 generations, 2 families, the children, grandparents from the old country. Eggs was their business. Chicken coops lined the backyard. We had another business. A man comes in for a rubber. Usual customers say, "You doubt it's a setup." Fuzz never bothered anyone anyway. Ramses are Trojans. Want a 6-pack? What will it be? Birth control was out. Even docs could be thrown in jail, but men needed rubbers when they needed them. A hand under the counter, my hand under the counter. Brought in the bucks. To the court knocked down the law. No one talked about it. Condoms worth their weight in gold, not gas, not cars, not eggs. And then the last 2 poems I'm going to read from the sequence called The Months. I'm going to read August and November. The poem matched for August is called Driving Home on a Late August Evening. Houses catch fire in failing light as the day dies. Vacant windows, glowing embers. Night will soon extinguish the sun. Stars multiply without end, seeding the sky, and a waning moon whispers, "Gone, gone." Dark trees, full of themselves in high summer, rim the road, cry, "Remember us as we are now." I sense the long days pass, slow journey of earth round the sun toward winter's dark solstice. It has always been so. Born in the house of the fish under a new moon, I have felt the heavy pull, the highs, the lows, saw its solstice of sleep at its ebb, obscurity of dream, and at its fullness howled abuses toward an imperfect world. And then November, the poem is titled Thanksgiving for Susan. I waken in soft light to thee and me, bodies conforming to each other. My breath blows gently onto your shoulder, lips touching soft skin. If I were to open my eyes onto the day, this fragile moment would pass. And I have grown aware in the space between sleep and waking of a thought. Our breaths, the slow movement of air passing repeatedly, minute by minute, into and out of our lungs, mingle in this bedroom as over the years our lives have, and I must give thanks.